Hello, everyone. I am Toastmaster Maiko Demevia Perocho from the Toastmasters Club of Davao and Davao Aguila Toastmasters Club in Division E. I was invited by Division K to give a talk on communicating effectively through brevity. So before anything else, allow me to give you the objectives for today's talk. At the end of the talk, the audience should be able to accomplish the following. First one is to discuss the essentials of communicating effectively. Second is to explain the three tendencies of communicating lengthily. And third is to express ideas with brevity. Before I begin with my discussion on how important brevity is when communicating, allow me to share my experience when I delivered my first speech in Toastmasters International. It was in September 2016 when I delivered my icebreaker speech for the Competent Communication Manual. When I drafted my speech, I felt like there was a need for me to impress my audience. And being a language teacher, I believe that the use of complicated or highfalutin words would really impress my audience. So I delivered my speech and I wowed them during the speech delivery. However, when it was time to hear my feedback, the speech evaluator told me that he really was confused during the speech delivery. Instead of acquainting himself with me being a new part of the organization, he was confused because he failed to understand most portions of the speech. And he also gave a comment that it was because of the difficult or complex words that I used in my speech. That experience, my first ever speech delivery in Toastmasters International, became an eye opener. It made me see the reality that when you communicate, the very importance of why you converse with people, the way you relay message, the way you communicate, is for you to be easily understood by your audience. I think, yes, it's good to use complex words at times because the complex words are the more that people will look at you as someone who's really an expert in that field. However, not everyone can really understand the technical terms or the jargons that you are using in your speeches or in your expressions. Because of that experience as well, I was reminded that brevity and simplicity are two important things when delivering speeches or when expressing your ideas towards people. And so, this is the main goal of my talk. It is for you to be enlightened about how you can apply brevity in your speeches or in your daily expressions, on how you could make people easily understand the context and the content of your utterances or your discourses. So, let us first know the how and the why. Concise speaking is a frequent challenge for most speakers. This is very true because most often than not, we really experience speakers or we really witness speakers who are very careful with their word choice or diction, as we call it in the context of public speaking. However, most speakers also encounter problems when it comes to how they make their statements concise. Whenever you are a public speaker, sometimes you have this difficulty to sustain the momentum when you are actually speaking. The difficulty or the challenge here is when you have a lot of ideas in your mind and you want to express them fast so that there is this continuum of ideas that you are relaying to your audience. And the moment that you slow down in the middle of your speech or in the middle of your delivery, sometimes you get interrupted or interfered because of your pace. And because of that, we have the tendency to blabber. We have the tendency to use verbose statements to the point that we are no longer understood by our audience. Concision is hard because most speakers have lots of information to convey in a very limited time. Well, let's put this one in the context of a Toastmaster. We know that if you're a Toastmaster, you love public speaking so much. Or you might not love it yet, but you are having that feels of a public speaker. And so you want to have the spotlight on you and speak so that you could really grow through the evaluations that will be given to you. And the common risk is that transition never happens. Making your statements concise is really problematic for most, not only for Toastmasters, but also for other speakers outside the organization. Let us also be reminded that some listeners have limited attention span. Not all the time that our listeners could focus during our speech delivery. There are also moments when we are timed when presenting in front. For example, if it is for academic or professional purposes, most often than not, we are given a time allocation when we have to speak. Same goes in the organization, in Toastmasters International, because you're also given a specific time to deliver a speech project. And because there are constraints with time, we also have problems with attention span of your audience. You have to get your point across quickly and efficiently. But the big question is how? How do we make sure that in all of the words that we say, the meaning is already there? Another reason is that it is tough to be concise because it is psychological in nature. Sometimes it is because of nervousness. And our stage anxiety is really our worst enemy when it comes to public speaking. Our nervousness sometimes hinders us from expressing our ideas effectively. And that is why, because we panic when we speak in front, most especially if it is impromptu, we have the tendency to speak a lot of words to the point that we are no longer understood by our audience. So it is very important to know the very nature why we are experiencing difficulties with regard to the use or the observance of conciseness when speaking in front. This time, let's talk about additional information about the whys of this difficulty or challenge in observing conciseness when speaking. A nervous or disorganized speaker might take 100 words to express what a calm and focused speaker can say in 20. If you are nervous, definitely you could speak a lot. However, there are two types of nervous speakers. There are those who could speak a lot, and there are those who could not speak at all because of so much nervousness. The good news is that concise speaking is a skill that can be learned and improved. The way that we talk concisely could definitely be learned, and we could be polished as to how we could talk more effectively towards our audience. And this is what we are going to learn in this discussion. Why be more concise in public speaking? Concise speaking makes a huge difference in the quality of your presentations. The advantages include, first one, focusing the audience. Second is memorability. Third is persuasiveness. Fourth is efficiency. Next is speaking slower. And lastly is professionalism and competence. So these are the things that we could consider as the benefits of talking concisely in front of a crowd or the public. First one is focusing the audience. When you give your audience too much information, you make it harder for them to know what is most important. Try to observe it when you are listening to a public speaker who talks a lot. Sometimes we get easily confused with the point, most especially if the speech is not that organized. So it is very important that you choose your words wisely so that even if the statements are brief, but you could be easily understood by your audience. That's the point there. However, when you speak concisely with fewer words, the audience will have an easier time separating the wheat from the chaff. You can manage their attention and focus better. And because of that, you can easily grab the attention of your audience and make sure that you could sustain such a focus all throughout your speech delivery. Second one is memorability. It is fundamentally easier to remember a simple message than a complicated one, right? When you use simpler statements or simpler words, you could be easily remembered by your audience. What matters most is that even if the statement is brief, the message is still relayed or conveyed to your audience effectively. Third one is persuasiveness. Concise speaking increases process fluency, or how easy it is for the brain to process a message. Try to imagine it when you listen to a complicated statement, let's say a statement filled with a lot of gobbledygook statements or statements with a lot of double meanings. Definitely, you will encounter or experience difficulties in understanding or deciphering the content of the message. So it is highly ideal that you use simpler statements so that the level of persuasiveness could also be sustained all throughout the speech delivery. Sometimes the introductory part is, or it's easier for you to convince your audience to believe you with the introductory and the conclusive part. But with the body of the speech, there is a tendency that your audience would no longer be attentive to your speech delivery. And so you have to make sure that there is balance among the three parts of your speech, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And make sure that from the introduction going down to the conclusion, there is still this persuasiveness. Next one is efficiency. A small number of words can be delivered in a shorter amount of time than a large number of words. Efficient communication is prized and appreciated by all audiences. It shows the speaker respects their time and it allows everyone to be more productive. For example, in the Toastmasters International Organization, we highly value time, and that is whenever we have speaking roles or when we deliver formal speeches, we are really timed by a designated timekeeper. This is for us to be reminded that we also need to respect the speaking time of other members. It is for efficiency purposes that we need to always be mindful about the time when we deliver our speeches or when we express something. And so there is this necessity for conciseness. Next one is speaking slower. If your message can be expressed in fewer words, you have the freedom to speak slower in the same amount of time. Speaking slowly has numerous benefits, including the ability to put more emphasis and emotional expression on your words. Try to imagine when you deliver a formal speech and then you're running out of time. What would you do? Sometimes you compromise the emotions that you inject in your words, and that might be too risky. So what you have to do is that whenever you use concise statements, it will be easier for you to speak slowly and guarantee that emotions are still there when speaking. And lastly, professionalism and competence. A speaker who needs to take 500 words to express what another can say in 120 words demonstrates a lack of expertise and lack of familiarity with the subject matter. Precision in communication indicates that the speaker has so much familiarity with the topic that they have developed mental shortcuts and patterns to fully understand it. It does not guarantee that when a speaker is a fast talker, automatically that speaker is an expert. Remember, what matters most here is how you communicate your ideas and thoughts towards other people. If you could observe simplicity when expressing this, that means you're really a master of what you're talking about. But the faster you talk, the more that you're risking the chances of letting you be understood by your audience. And so, conciseness plays an important role in this aspect. This time, let's talk about the three tendencies in public speaking. Oftentimes, when we are not being concise with our statements or expressions, these three tendencies emerge. First one is the tendency of over-explaining. Second one is the tendency of under-preparing. And third one is the tendency to completely miss the point. Let's start with the first tendency, over-explaining. Many people over-explain, most especially when we narrate stories or share an account. To overcome this, think about all of the things you can talk about on a topic. Trim the less essential information and keep only the essential components. So it is very important that you know how to narrow down your topic so that you could also use concise expressions in your speech or in your expressions. It is also important that all the time we avoid over-explaining because sometimes the more we explain, the more we confuse our audience. People speak 150 words a minute, but people can process only 750 words a minute. This means if your speech isn't on target, people's minds have 600 leftover words floating around their brain, and typically they will start to think about other things. And because of that, the attention span could not be sustained. So, again, remember, avoid over-explaining because tendency is that it will just cause confusion. And second one, overthinking or miscommunication on the end of the listeners. Another thing that we need to remember is under-preparing. Okay, avoid under-preparing. If you don't prepare, you cannot be brief because you don't know what the key points are. One way to prepare is to create a mind map, which is a visible outline on paper to help organize your thoughts. Or you can simply do the mental outlining. Assemble your thoughts in advance and be prepared. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you deliver a speech, you always have to have a copy with you. Mental outlining would really help, most especially in organizing your speech or your expressions. And through that, you are still preparing. However, you need to be very careful when using outlines because during the speech delivery, tendency is that you might be too focused on the outline that you have that you fail to effectively convey the message through the emotions towards your audience. To be concise and clear, it's a balance of being clear and concise. You can be too brief, said McCormack, quoting the French Blaise Pascal, who said, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time. So for you to be concise, you also need to prepare. Prepare the script, prepare a copy of the speech, if necessary, familiarize it, if not memorize, and deliver the speech confidently and effectively. The third tendency and the third and the last tendency that we need to remember is completely missing the point. Let's try to analyze this situation. You're at work and it's late in the afternoon and somebody knocks on your door and tells you, have you got a minute? Nobody is so busy that they do not have a minute. And the person starts talking and talking and talking and you start thinking, what's the point? And the speaker does not even know. The speaker thinks the more he talks, the more the point will emerge. But that's definitely a misconception. The shorter your statement is, the more that you could be understood. However, let us always be reminded with relevance. Sometimes we have this tendency to make our statements or expressions short, but the message is not complete. So even if the statement is brief, make sure that the message you're trying to convey is completely embedded or implied in a statement. Okay? So again, you have to remember that there are certain tendencies that we need to avoid when not observing conciseness in our expressions. And because of that, allow me to introduce to you Deadwood expressions. For some of you, Deadwood expressions might not be a familiar term, but Deadwood expressions in the context of linguistics are statements, phrases, or words which are a product of redundancies. Or, if not redundancies, at least a lengthy statement which is not necessary when being expressed. And so these Deadwood expressions must be eradicated in all forms of expressions because they just cause confusion. In the Toastmaster setting, you also have the tendency to talk a lot about something to the point that we exaggerate our statements or to the point that we make our statements lengthy. Well, in fact, we could have them trimmed. So this time, let me introduce to you some examples of these statements with so much word count to the point that you could actually trim them so that you could make it simpler and more understandable. For example, a majority of instead of using most. We have a three-word statement here, a majority of, but you can actually express it in just a single word, most. Instead of saying a sufficient amount of, why not say enough? Another thing is when you say add an additional question, okay, you can simply say add a question, okay? Advanced planning and advanced warning. You do not say advanced planning because planning is already advanced, right? Warning is also advanced. So putting advanced before these words would make the statement redundant, okay? So you simply say planning or warning. After the conclusion of, you simply say conclusion or conclude. As a matter of fact, you can actually get rid of that because if you believe that your statement is already a fact, you don't have to put it anymore as an introductory phrase or statement. As a means of, you can use to instead. At a later date, you can say later. At the present time, you can use now, right? At this point in time, simply use now. At least you have one word versus the four-word statement that you use at the present time or at this point in time. By means of, you can use through instead. Current trend. This is really one of the problematic statements that I have been hearing in a Toastmasters meeting. Instead of saying current trend, why not simply say trend? Okay, because the trend is already happening in the current time. Okay? Despite the fact, you can use although instead. due to the fact that you can use because. During the time that, you can use while instead. Fewer in number, when you talk about few, that means it already involves numbers. So you can simply say fewer and get rid of in number. For the purpose of, simply say for, because for can be used as an introductory word for a purpose or a function. Give consideration to, simply say consider. In a number of, you can simply say many or several. In close proximity to, simply say near. In most cases, simply say usually. Okay? We have here more examples on how we could trim down some statements. This is very common. In order to, or in order. I have been hearing most of my students using this expression, even some professionals. So we need to get rid of this to observe conciseness or brevity in our speeches. So instead of saying in order to or in order, simply say to. Okay? In some cases, you can use sometimes. In the event that, use if instead. In the field of, you simply say the field. Okay? In science, in history. Okay? In the near future, you can use soon. In the view of the fact that, use since instead is capable of, simply use can. Okay? It has been found out that, so you can remove that one in your statement. Also the statement, it is noted that. You can remove that one as an introductory statement also. And then make inquiry about, simply say ask regarding, pose a query on a monthly basis. You can simply say monthly. And then prior to, simply say before. Reach a conclusion, simply say conclude. So as to, why not simply say to? The reason is because I heard several professionals using this statement in their expressions or speeches. If you say the reason is because there is already an introductory word subordinating conjunction for a reason. So get rid of the reason is and simply say because. With regard to shorten it, simply say about, and with the exception that, except that. We still have many examples of these statements that we can use in our expressions. And to give you more examples, we have here common mistakes. And most of these mistakes I heard in some Toastmasters meetings and even in some daily conversations that we do with other people. First one is we need to be direct to the point. If we analyze this sentence, there is this redundancy. And to observe brevity or conciseness in this statement, we can simply say we need to be direct or we need to be on point. Because when you say direct to the point, that's already redundant. Second one, in my personal opinion, life is not really that challenging. Please do take note that in this statement, we already have the personal pronoun, possessive pronoun, my. Okay? So we can simply say, in my opinion, and get rid of personal because my here is already a possessive pronoun for the word opinion. Third statement, this will enable us to become stronger. Why not simply say, this will make us stronger? Get rid of enable us to become. Fourth one, this is imperative for me to be able to reach my goals. Why not simply say, this is imperative for me to reach my goals? We Filipinos are very fond of using the statement to be able to. Okay, we can actually get rid of this statement to make our sentences or our utterances shorter. Another one is, I can consider him as the most outstanding speaker. Outstanding is already on its superlative form. Therefore, we can get rid of most and simply say outstanding speaker. However, we can say most outstanding if it is for literary purposes, like you would like to exaggerate as, for example, a person being very outstanding. So you can use most outstanding. We can visit them tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the morning. Definitely, there's no 9 a.m. in the afternoon or in the evening. So you can simply say we can visit them tomorrow at 9 a.m. Let us go and look for an ATM machine. So this is the common mistake among us Filipinos. When you say ATM, that already means automated teller machine. So simply say, let us go and look for an ATM. Okay? My greetings go to each and every attendee of this meeting. This is also, or this has been a widely used expression. Each and every. Okay, this is redundant. So you can simply say, my greetings go to every attendee of this meeting. Another one is, it was an emergency situation, so I had to be late. An emergency is already a situation, so you can simply express it was an emergency, so I had to be late. Another thing, people need to enter in the rooms. When you go or when you say enter, that means going into a specific place. So simply say people need to enter the rooms. Next is, let us evaluate the final outcome. An outcome is already a final product of something. So simply say, let us evaluate the outcome. Okay. And then we also have another set here. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who is here in this meeting. You can simply say, first, I'd like to thank everyone who's here in this meeting. Or foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who's here in this meeting. Another example is, we need to be certain about our future plans. As what I mentioned a while ago, you don't say advanced planning because planning is already advanced. So you can say, we need to be certain about our future or about our plans. Another example is, let us all gather together and solve this problem. You can simply say, let us all gather and solve this problem. Get rid of together because gathering already involves a lot of people being together. So there's already a redundancy there. Another thing is, when you say, please kneel down and offer a prayer. When you kneel, that means you're going down, right? So you may get rid of the preposition down and simply say, please kneel and offer a prayer. Same is true with, let us all bow down and feel the presence of our Lord. You can simply say, let us all bow and feel the presence of our Lord. I believe this is a new innovation. An innovation is already something new. So get rid of the word new and simply say, I believe this is an innovation, or this is something new. And then the expression, during that period of time, I realized how difficult it is for me and my family. Simply say, during that period or during that time, I realized how difficult it is for me and my family, because period and time are just synonymous. Next is, at the present time, we are experiencing a sudden shift in the educational system. You can simply say at the present or at present. Okay? And then lastly, it still remains to be a problematic aspect of the company. Simply say it remains to be a problematic aspect of the company. So when we express statements, we have to make sure that we choose our words wisely. We have to make sure also that all words are coherent and all expressions are also connected in terms of ideas. And in order for us to do that one, we need to observe conciseness at all times. Again, we do not want to confuse our listeners with so many expressions that in the end, they could no longer decipher the meaning of the intended meaning. So it is our responsibility as speakers to make sure also that we are understood by our audience. And to do that, we need to observe both brevity and simplicity. So before I end my discussion, allow me to share this to you. This is from Albert Einstein. The definition of genius is taking the complex and making it simple. Remember that when we speak, it doesn't mean that if you use highfalutin words, you are automatically an expert of something or you are already that intelligent. Humility is one quality of a great speaker. If you know how to express it with simplicity and brevity, then definitely you are also considering the understanding of the people listening to you. And that is one great character that a speaker must always possess. If you are really a genius, you will not torment your people or listeners with highfalutin words or complex structures in terms of sentence. You can actually simplify it and goal to be easily understood by your listeners and the people witnessing your speech delivery. So I hope I gave you a meaningful input. This may be a brief input, but reminding you about the importance of brevity will also enable you to make sure that the next time you deliver a speech or you draft your speech, your statements are brief but substantial or meaty. So when you deliver speeches, you have to goal it. You have to make it as a challenge for yourself that you have to make your statements shorter yet understandable on the end of your listeners. So if you have questions, you may send them to me and I would be very glad to give you my responses or answers. So to Division K, most especially to Immediate Past Division K Director Edralyn Gascon, thank you very much for this speaking opportunity. I hope I enlightened you in this aspect, and I hope that I was able to give you more interest in joining Toastmasters International. Thank you very much.